All right, ATM. Why is this your standout track from the album?
Oh, it was such a hard decision because I like so many of these songs for a lot of different reasons.
Good.
But I also feel like Girl really represents the album as a whole. And I think where I was when I was kind of listening to the song and discovering sexuality and kind of what you were talking about earlier, Tyler, of like being sensual, but not being kind of in your face about it, kind of leaning back and just like the words kind of say it all.
Yeah.
I also do love kind of the switch up at the end. And it gets more staccato with its lyrics and kind of its meaning. And it does get a little bit more in your face, but in a calming way.
Right. It's crazy that that's possible, but it does, doesn't it?
It does. It's kind of like out of left field a little bit.
Yeah.
I feel like the song overall, I feel like I'm always kind of looking for music that I'm like, this is okay to play with like my parents and they're not going to complain about it.
Yeah.
And the song like mostly fits it until you get to the end where it's like, okay, whoa, not anymore.
Cover your ears, Mom. You don't need to hear this part.
I sort of feel like Syd and Kaytranada are a perfect match. Like, it's a perfect combination here. I mean, I don't know how much, like, who's involved with everything on this song, but I just know that, like, when I was listening to it without looking at the track listing, once it hit this song, I was like, and there's Kaytranada. Like, that's exactly where it was. Have you explored Kaytranada's work as well?
Only a little bit, but this was my introduction to Kaytranada. As Janelle Monáe was my introduction to the internet then kind of became an introduction to a lot of people. It was my reintroduction to Tyler, the Creator, my introduction to Vic Mensa. Very quick thing about Kaytranada, I was at the Beyonce birthday show where Kaytranada performs, opening for Beyonce, and that was super amazing.
Whoa.
You just dropping that like it's no big deal.
You saw Kaytranada open for Beyonce.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Beyonce's birthday. Yes.
I want to make sure I got that. Okay.
Wow. How was that show?
Oh, incredible.
Yeah.
That's a whole other podcast.
It is. It is. Jeez. We're a very pro Beyonce podcast here. So this is...
As you should be.
Yeah. There's something about the way that you can just tell, like we're talking about like the kind of ever tangled web of connections here, right? And like how it gives you a sense of like people's taste. I also think that somehow Syd and Kaytranada still managed to fly under the radar in terms of popularity and in terms of like their public profile, even when they're doing things like opening for freaking Beyonce.
Yeah. Or even just, I mean, like from Renaissance, like Syd wrote Plastic Off the Sofa. It's all these kind of like little connections. I don't know. And maybe that's also like an aspect of me that like also loves this album is that there's still people who haven't discovered it.
Yeah.
I also was very surprised that when I started asking some close friends about like the internet, when I started listening, I was like, oh my gosh, like I thought I was discovering something truly new. And like close friends were like, yeah. And so being able to kind of like sit in between the like, oh, I'm cool, I know the internet.
Yeah.
But also like, I'm still coming into it. I'm still a newbie at that time. It was just so awesome.
We've been focusing primarily on Syd, and of course, like she's fantastic. But like, are you as familiar with any of the solo work of like Matt Martians or Steve Lacy? Like, have you gone further into like their individual efforts?
I'll be honest, no. A little bit for Steve Lacy, but I also think just like at the time that I was discovering the internet, I was very much so just listening to Black women at that point.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, you all are probably great. But at this moment, it's for the women.
Yeah.
And I'm like coming back into a time where I'm like exploring more. There's so many people that like over the years I missed because I was just so focused and I felt like I was catching up. So thank you for the reminder, Michael. I need to go back.
I feel like there's a reason we're fixating on Syd so much, but like I mean they are good artists in their own right.
And Steve's popped off since he's really kind of his profile's grown. And he's only 26 years old. It's crazy to me.
Oh my gosh!
I know.
I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah, outrageous.
I I don't like discovering when people that young are already that successful. I'm like, okay, all right.
That's successful in like seeming, obviously we parasocial relationships with artists are what they are, right? But seemingly well adjusted too. Like that's the other crazy thing, is to be on that level and also be chill, have your shit together a little bit. Let's talk about the concept of perfection a little bit, because, our brief to you was asking you to nominate at least 4 albums that you believed were quote unquote perfect, but we didn't define that term for you. So we'd love to know a little bit more about what your standards were that you were using to assess albums when you were nominating them.
Yeah, a little backstory. I go to a good amount of concerts. When I go to concerts, especially when I was going to less concerts, I was very much like I'm going to study this artist before I go to the concert. Like, I don't want to go to a concert and not know a song they're performing. Right. Like, I need to know everything. I remember when I went to my first Beyonce concert in St. Louis, which was the day after she dropped Beyonce. But like leading up to that concert, every day I just listened to one Beyonce album, just like from start to finish. I'd listen to it at least twice. And then I would kind of like give it a rating of like, how many songs do I like on this album?
You're a girl after our own heart, ATM. You really are. You really are.
I'm a data nerd. And so that's how I decided like, oh, this is like my favorite Beyonce album. I do that with a lot of artists. I do that with a lot of CDs. There are plenty of albums that I love, but there's maybe 1 or 2 songs that I'm like, I do not like this song. I just don't like it. And unfortunately, that kind of knocks it out of like the perfect album. And I think Ego Death, The Internet was one that I'm like, there's not a single song that I can say that I don't enjoy. Like people talk about like a no skip album. Like this is just like an easy album to just play and not be worried about like, oh, but when this song comes up, like we got to skip this one. Now, like with my family, yeah, I probably would actually just not play it. Like it's not for everyone. I do understand that. But for me, like it just feels like a perfect album tonally, I think rhythmically. As I said, during that time in Austin, like things were so hectic. I just needed music that could calm me. And it was a great album that I could just put on and just like take a deep breath. It just felt like a meditation. But also lyrically, like since I discovered the album throughout my life, even when I was listening this morning, I'm like, oh, today this song really relates to my life right now, for better or worse. And that really stands out to me. It just feels like there's something for every state of life.
Yeah. It has to be adaptable in that way to to where you are. It has to meet you there.
That's a very concise way to say everything I just said. Thank you so much.
Listen, it's you said it all. You said it all. I'm just here to bump set spike, baby.
That's I'm like trying to like find the flowery words, and you were just like, it's adaptable, and I'm like, yeah.
We're opening your pickle jar for you. That's all.
Thank you so much. I always need help. So yeah, I think that's generally what makes a perfect album to me. Yeah. And then what makes this album a perfect album.
Do you view this album as kind of one document, or do you view this album kind of on a song by song basis? Because I think this is something we also see coming up from time to time, is where like people treat the album as if it's one sort of total thing versus a collection of songs. And that seems to, I don't know, indicate somehow a person's approach. How does this album exist in your mind in that sense?
That's a really good question. I think this one exists as both, because I can listen through it and it can feel like just one run-on sentence, one piece. Mm-hmm. At the same time, songs like Girl, songs like Gabby, they do stand out. You know, Michael, you mentioned Penthouse Cloud earlier, and I was like, I didn't automatically hear it. If someone were to start playing it, I'd be like, oh, yes, okay, yeah, it's this part of the progression.
Right.
But that's one of the songs that, like, it doesn't directly come to mind. It doesn't come to mind as, like, a single or, like, you know, something that was promoted off of the album. And so it's a little bit of both of, like, you have those hits, you have those songs that you quickly know by name and you automatically can start singing along. And then you have other songs that just feel like they fill out the overall piece really well.
That's a perfectly reasonable answer, I would say.
It's a yes/no answer.
Which I love. There's nothing's clear about any of this shit, you know?
And you're still listening to this album pretty regularly? Like it still gets a regular rotation in the car or in your headphones?
I'll be honest, I fell off a little bit for personal reasons. When I moved out to LA, I met someone who is related to a good amount of Odd Future. And so that was both exciting, but also terrifying. And I've never met any of them. That was something that was offered to me. And most of the time I was like, no, I think I want to keep this separate.
Yeah.
And as that like relationship went through highs and low, I was glad that I kept it separate. But sometimes it became hard to like listen to the music. So it was so great listening to it recently and just remembering like a lot of memories of that album prior to that person that I met and prior to that relationship, but also like seeing pieces of that relationship in this music and being kind of like, hey, go talk to your cousin.
Yeah.
And figure things out.
They seem to get it.
Yeah, they seem to at least be able to vocalize that.
That is a danger of LA, isn't it? That sometimes there's this proximity that's sort of strange where you end up being in physical spaces with people whose work you really connect with on a personal level, and it's like, oh, this isn't supposed to be happening. What's going on here?
Yeah, I both love it, but I still want to be the person at the party who's just like at the back wall observing it from afar. Like I don't want to be in it. I think especially with music and music being so personal, like music reminds you of a time, music can remind you of people, and sometimes those experiences are great and sometimes they're not so great. And then that kind of has like, it really impacts how you listen to that music. I'm really glad to be on this podcast and to suggest this album because it really got me back into listening to the internet and being like, oh no, this is like still a me thing.
Yeah, that's important. You can it still belongs to you. Even like Michael and I are big Radiohead guys, and so it's like I think the question of whether we would ever have it, like let's say in a crazy world we would ever have them on this podcast, it would almost be a little bit like of an identity crisis in some ways. I feel like you don't want to subsume your identity so much into this piece of art that it's ostensibly has nothing to do with you, but also there's an ownership that happens that is separate from the artist themselves. I think there should be a healthy boundary, or else we get into situations like there was that video that Chapel Roan put out a couple weeks ago that you might have seen, where she was like, "Don't come up to me, you don't know me, like I don't owe you anything, or I don't owe you time like that." And I kind of feel that, like I could feel the pain from her, where she was like, "I'm just trying to do my job, and like this layer of expectation that you have on me, it's unfair and it hurts." It's a complicated thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I can't even imagine just like how that must feel, because at the end of the day, like these are just people just like you and I, and it just so happens that like they're good at making music and they like to perform on a stage, but when they leave that stage, like they're not necessarily that person you saw on stage.
Totally.
A lot of people have kind of a separate persona to perform. And then with the internet, you can just find out so much information about people in a way that like, hey, like if you were meeting a friend and you found out this information about them and you went up to them and said like, oh, you were born here, it would be kind of creepy. So maybe don't do that to celebrities.
Are you familiar with Nardwuar?
Oh, I am. Yes.
Yeah. So
I would say that's a fun way.
It's a fun way, but isn't it kind of crazy? Like when you're thinking about it in this context, for all of you out there who don't know who Nardwuar is, and Michael, you know who Nardwuar is, right?
I do not.
You don't know who Nardwuar is?
Okay.
No.
Okay. Well,
this would be amazing.
This is relevant to this conversation. So Nardwuar is this, like, he's kind of been around for a long time, if I'm not mistaken, but he's a Canadian. I believe he's Quebecois. Like, I think he's from Montreal, or at least from, like that province, and is a music journalist. And he's kind of like a cartoon character, like a Looney Tune, sort of. He's got like a crazy hat and these glasses, and he talks like this. Da, 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 da. And his whole thing, I actually think he did this for the internet. I need to go. I didn't watch that in preparation for this, but I'll bet you he's talked to the internet. His whole thing is that he'll interview artists and he'll have somehow, through his research, discovered some minute detail about their personal life and like some album that mattered to them when they were 7 years old. I don't know how he does it. Like it's kind of scary. They capture these reactions from these artists, and they're sometimes really touched by like the fact that he went and discovered this tiny little detail from their childhood or from their early upbringing. But other times they're really creeped out by it.
Truly, like if you were to go to watch this, you had to do like a drinking game of like take a shot every time someone goes, how do you know them?
Yeah. So there's part of it that's like flattering, right? Because he's gone to the effort of like learning all of this about these artists and preparing in this way to sort of like respect their personality and their whole character as we are able to construct it via the internet. On another level, it feels kind of invasive in some ways.
Yeah, it's like family details. It's stuff that you can't necessarily find online with a simple Google search. Like it is deep research, which like as a person who loves data and research, respect. As a person who doesn't always want to confront people about the things that I know, it can come off as creepy.
Yeah, it's a strange experience, Michael. I'll share a couple good ones with you.
Yeah, because I got some stuff to check out now.
There's a relatively small amount of easily accessible information out there, is what Michael mentioned in kind of preparing for his 60s. You said there wasn't a ton that you were able to find to fill out that intro, right?
Not really. Yeah. I mean, I think like there are some interviews, but I don't know, just feel, I mean, maybe for them, I mean, I thought it's like, one of a few things. Like one could be the fact that maybe they're just a little more private, or two, maybe it's all about the music for them, or three, it could also be just sort of like, the tendency of music journalists to kind of, have a bias towards white artists specifically. And so maybe there's just not as much coverage of them in some ways. And they're not like super mainstream. Like they're not, not everyone has heard of them. So I mean, any number of reasons why we don't know a ton about them. Although I feel like, again, Syd feels like the most, we keep coming back to Syd. Syd feels like the most high profile member of the band.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, Tyler, should we move on to our...
I think it's time for the deliberation phase, isn't it?
It's time for the deliberation.
All right.
Dun, dun,
oh,
wow.
Dun, dun.
Wait, okay. Question. Before we deliberate, can I tell a very quick the internet story?
Yes, please.
Something that happens also a lot for me is like discover an artist, get really into them, and then like I have to go see them in concert. Yeah. And so after I discovered the internet, found out they were coming to Austin, like reached out to like two of my close friends, and they were like, oh yeah, I love the internet. Like I love Syd, like let's go. And I was like, oh, no one's told me about this group. Thanks so much for putting me on. Find them for myself. And so we go to this concert. We drive there because we're like, we're not going to really be drinking. Like it's going to be a chill night. We park in the parking lot next to the venue. There are signs that say you can't park here, but the venue sent out emails saying you could. So we're like, we'll just park here. Yeah. We go into the venue. We meet up with my friend who's like talking with this guy. And at that point, she had been in a relationship for, I don't know, like 2 or 3 years. So I'm like, who is this? And she was just like, this is some guy. He doesn't know this group. He just bought a ticket today because he wanted something to do. He's recently divorced. He's going to hang out with us. And we're like, okay, cool. And so like we get like a round of drinks. We're kind of close to the stage. It was a great concert. We noticed this guy is like chatting up this other girl. Okay. At the end of the night, we're talking to the guy and we're just like, hey, like, can we connect with you? Are we going to see you again? And he's just like, no. And we're like, oh, okay. I mean, thank you so much for being honest. Like we had a nice night at this concert together. And then we head out and our car has been towed. And so we have to go to like the backwoods of Austin, Texas to go pay to get my friend's car. And it was just like a very eventful night between this guy who was like, we're not going to be friends after hanging out with us for 3 hours, and then the car getting towed. He was so honest. We really respect that. We bring it up a lot. We're like, remember when we met that guy, hung out with him, really got to know him. And then we were like, are we going to see you again? And he was like, no.
Damn.
But it was such a great concert. I feel like out of all of the kind of like interludes, I remember Syd saying that she wrote the song Under Control for her band. And that just like felt so nice and just like felt like a great friendship song to be like, I know things are wild, but like I got us.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah, great song. Incredible song. This definitely adds to the case. I'm glad you shared that story. And also,
Thank you so much.
why do they have to put impound lots in the worst places? Like, couldn't they? The one time I ever had my knock on wood, but like the one time I ever had my car towed, it had to go to the worst, like most uninviting place in Chicago to go get it. It was just a bad experience, and I don't think it has to be that way. I think they could do better.
We're going out there like midnight.
Make it safe. Make it approachable. Yeah, come on,
Tyler. I think you're running for office. This is your platform.
No, I am not. I won't do it. I don't want it. I don't want it.
I won't do it.
I won't do it. Anyway, okay. So let's move to the deliberation phase. Sound effect. Bum, bum. Okay, we're gonna figure out a sound effect for that. I'll start with kind of what's stuck with me about ATM's argument. I like when a guest sort of like presents their argument almost in the style of the album that they are presenting. ATM, we haven't been friends very long, but like I know the tenderness in your heart. I know the kindness that is inherent to you. That was kind of like how you approached this. I just feel like it was very effective in that way because you're expressing the tenderness that this album has running through every moment. There's not enough of that in popular music. I know it's out there. I know that there's tons of that, but like I guess I'm like I want more of that tenderness. I want more of that, especially in music that is hip hop and R&B inflected. Like we know that that's possible there, and we know that there is a great tradition of it. And I think that this album does that really well. Your expression of how it like opened up your ideas about yourself, how it connected to you on that level, how it's adaptable to you in all these different phases of your life and how it's stuck with you in those ways. I think those are really great arguments for this album's perfection. Michael, what's sticking with you?
What's sticking with me is that if ATM and I are ever at a party together, we're just going to be the two hanging out against the wall, listening to, hopefully wherever we are, it's a cool party, and they've got this album playing. I mean, I think that's like, I don't know. I love it when we have these conversations and I get a clear visual picture of how to experience this album. And it's even better if I feel like I get to know the person a little bit more and how they're connected to the album in that moment. And I feel like when we started talking about that, and of course the fact that like music as a connection to queer identity, that's something I'm always lauding on this podcast. So yeah, for me that's where the connection is.
I'd say you did pretty well. I'd say it's looking pretty good.
Well, Tyler,
yeah,
you've heard ATM's case.
I have.
You've listened to the album.
Yeah,
you've done some research.
I have. The
big question is, does the internet's ego death go to 11? Can it join the pantheon, Tyler?
Yes, it can.
Oh, yeah.
We need another sound effect for that. We need like some sort of, like
Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Kind of like lead up music, and then something triumphal. Hell yes, it can. Great album. Yes, add it to the pantheon. Well done, ATM.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
This was thank you for joining us. Couldn't be more pleased to have you. We want to give you a chance to like plug anything that you want to. If there's something you want people to go check out that you've worked on, or just something that you love, is there anything you want to call out now? This is your moment to do it.
I work in animation, and so definitely go check out Thelma the Unicorn and Ultraman Rising on Netflix. 2 great films that I got a pleasure of working with the creators, directors, producers, production. Check out Austin Film Festival, the Screenwriting Festival. Check out Series Fest, the Independent Episodic Festival. Support independent film, support independent pilots, support people who want to create, and also help them along their way so that they can be better at what they do.
That is something I feel like it can happen all over too, right? Like doesn't matter where you live. You don't have to be out here with us in LA. You can go check out the indie filmmakers in your town because they're out there.
Go to a festival. That's the thing I'm going to say. Go to a festival.
There we go.
Go to a festival. You won't regret it.
Well, ATM, it was so great meeting you. Thank you for introducing this album to me. Dear listeners, you should check out the whole thing. It's streaming on all the major platforms.
Mm-hmm.
And, while you're on those platforms, you should go ahead and, I don't know, give us a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. All that stuff. Like and subscribe. Like and subscribe.
Share us with your aunt. Your aunt will like this one. Your aunt will love ATM, let me tell you. Your aunt's going to love ATM, Mitchell.
Oh my God.
We appreciate you listening, y'all. As always, talk to you soon.